What if I told you that one of the most trusted goaltenders in Swedish hockey history became the symbol of the country's biggest collapse? Tommy Salo wasn't just a good goalie, he was a national hero, a calm, collected wall in net who helped carry Sweden through multiple Olympic campaigns and built a strong NHL career in the process. His positioning was sharp, his glove was quick, and for nearly a decade, he gave Swedish hockey fans someone to believe in. When he stood in goal, people felt safe, but then almost overnight, everything changed. It wasn't some slow decline or off-ice controversy. It was one shot, one moment, one puck floating through the air from center ice that would crash straight through his legacy. That goal didn't just lose a game, it didn't just knock Sweden out of the Olympics. It wiped away years of respect, trust, and belief. And the man who had once been cheered by thousands was suddenly being blamed by millions. For hockey fans who lived through it, the image is burned into memory. The puck goes up, it dips, it glances off Salo's shoulder, and it trickles into the net. Sweden, one of the favorites to win it all, was eliminated by Belarus, a team they weren't even supposed to break a sweat against. In just seconds, Tommy Salo's entire career took a turn. The guy who had worn the crown of Swedish hockey royalty suddenly became the face of humiliation. Newspapers tore him apart. Teammates looked shocked. Some fans said he choked. Others questioned his greatness. And while that one moment might have defined him in the eyes of the world, the truth is, there's a whole lot more to Tommy Salo's story. Because this isn't just a story about a bad goal. It's about what happens when an entire country puts their hopes on your shoulders and then watches you fall. It's about the pressure of playing in net, where one mistake can erase an entire career of greatness. And it's about how one man handled being turned into a villain almost overnight. If that goal hadn't happened, if that puck had bounced just a little bit differently, Tommy Salo might be mentioned in the same breath as Henrik Lundqvist. Maybe not as flashy, maybe not as dominant, but respected, solid, a champion who gave everything to his country. But that's not what happened. Instead, he became a punchline, a cautionary tale. And for years after, no matter what he did, whether it was solid play in the NHL, mentoring younger goalies, or quietly trying to move on, people still saw that one moment. That's the crazy thing about being a goalie. You can play 59 minutes of perfect hockey. You can make save after save, carry your team on your back, and give everything you have. But the only thing people will remember is the shot you didn't stop. And Tommy Salo didn't just miss a shot, he missed the shot, the one that flipped everything upside down. But if you think that's all there is to the story, you're wrong. Because before the heartbreak, before the memes and the headlines, there was a rise, there was brilliance, there was a kid from Surahammar who worked his way into Swedish hockey history. There was a moment when he stood at the top of the mountain with gold around his neck and a country behind him. This is the full story of Tommy Salo, from his rise through the Swedish leagues to the NHL spotlight to Olympic glory, and finally, to the moment that changed everything. And maybe, just maybe by the end, you'll see him a little differently. Before the world blamed Tommy Salo for a goal, he was just a quiet kid from Surahammar, Sweden, a small industrial town with just a few thousand people and not much noise. That suited Tommy just fine. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't crave attention. All he wanted was to stop pucks. Salo grew up in a working-class family. His dad worked in a factory. His mom was a steady hand at home. Hockey wasn't a dream. It was just something the local kids did for fun. But even as a boy, something about Tommy stood out. While other kids loved scoring goals and celebrating with fist pumps, Salo was different. He liked being the one who stopped the celebration, the one who ruined the other team's moment. There's something about goalies, how they think, how they act. They're usually wired a little differently, and Salo fit that mold perfectly. Quiet, calm, focused. He wasn't the loudest kid on the ice, he wasn't the biggest, but when the puck dropped, he locked in. He started his junior career with Västerås IK, a well-known club in Sweden's hockey system. It didn't take long before coaches noticed that this shy, quiet kid had nerves of steel. While other goalies panicked when things got messy in front of the net, Salo stayed cool. He tracked the puck well, he moved smooth, his reflexes weren't lightning quick, but his positioning was always smart. As he moved through the junior ranks, people began whispering that he might be something special. But even then, Salo never acted like a rising star. He didn't trash talk, he didn't showboat. He just showed up, worked hard, and played his position like it was life or death. His teammates respected that. Coaches loved it even more. By the early 1990s, Sweden had a reputation for producing good goalies, but they didn't often produce great ones, and that's where Salo started to change things. In 1993, he was selected to represent Sweden at the World Junior Championship. It was his first chance to play on a big international stage, and he didn't waste it. Salo helped Sweden take home the gold medal, putting together a calm and consistent performance throughout the tournament. He didn't post flashy numbers or steal headlines, but he made the stops that mattered. His reliability became his greatest weapon. Scouts in North America started paying attention. Who was this kid from Västerås that seemed so unshaken under pressure? That same year, the New York Islanders used their 5th-round pick in the NHL entry draft to take a chance on him. At the time, very few Swedish goalies were making it big in the NHL. It was a gamble, but the Islanders saw something in Salo, something they believed could grow into a franchise netminder. Back in Sweden, Salo continued to improve with Västerås IK's pro team. Playing against grown men, he still held his ground. His numbers were solid, but it wasn't just the stats. It was the way he carried himself, the way he stood tall even when the puck was bouncing, traffic was heavy, and chaos was all around him. That's what made Tommy Salo different. He wasn't a showman. He didn't make sprawling glove saves to get on highlight reels. Instead, he made hard saves look easy. His game was built on patience, body control, and hockey IQ. He read plays like a veteran. He rarely got caught out of position. And most of all, he never panicked. In Sweden, fans and analysts started calling him the calm in the storm. And for good reason. While flashier goalies would either dominate or collapse depending on the night, Salo stayed steady. He kept games close. He gave his teams a chance. That kind of dependability is rare in a goaltender, especially one so young. By the mid-90s, he had earned his place as one of the top Swedish goaltending prospects in the world. His international stock kept climbing. He was selected for the 1994 Winter Olympics in Lillehammer, not as a starter, but as a young backup with promise. At just 22 years old, Salo was about to step into one of the biggest hockey tournaments on the planet. No one knew it yet, but this quiet, steady kid from a small Swedish town was about to make history. Because Tommy Salo wasn't just rising, he was climbing faster than anyone realized, and soon, the world would start to take notice. When the New York Islanders drafted Tommy Salo in the 5th round of the 1993 NHL draft, not many fans took notice. At the time, European goalies, especially from Sweden, weren't always seen as safe bets. The North American game was faster, rougher, and more chaotic. Scouts worried that calm, position-based goalies wouldn't survive in a league that often felt like organized mayhem, but the Islanders had seen something in Salo during his international performances. He wasn't just calm, he was unshakable, and they figured that kind of mental strength might translate, even if the adjustment took time. So in 1994, Salo packed his bags and flew across the Atlantic to chase a dream. But nothing came easy. His first season in North America wasn't glamorous. He was sent to the Denver Grizzlies of the IHL, a minor league team far removed from the NHL spotlight. And the difference between Swedish hockey and the North American style hit him hard. The rinks were smaller, the game was faster, and the players, they crashed the net like they were trying to run through it. Salo, used to clean passing plays and space to read shots, suddenly found himself dealing with traffic, deflections, and players constantly in his crease. It was a crash course in survival. But here's the thing, he never complained. Most young goalies would have crumbled under that kind of pressure. Not Salo. He kept showing up to the rink, kept working, kept learning. He made adjustments, quicker reactions, tighter angles, more physical toughness in the crease. By the end of the season, he wasn't just holding his own, he was helping Denver win games. When the Grizzlies won the Turner Cup in 1995, Salo was a major part of that run, and his performance gave the Islanders confidence that he was ready for a bigger test. In the 1995-96 NHL season, Salo got his first real shot in New York. He split the year with veteran goalies like Eric Fichaud and Tommy's fellow countryman Tommy Soderstrom. It was a mess of a goalie rotation, but Salo managed to stand out. He wasn't spectacular. His stats were average, but there was something about the way he played that caught attention. He was reliable. He didn't lose his cool after a bad goal. He didn't blame his teammates when things fell apart. And most importantly, he made the tough saves when they mattered. It didn't take long before the Islanders realized they had something real in net. By the 1996-97 season, Salo had taken over the starting role. And even though the Islanders were far from a playoff team, Tommy gave them something they hadn't had in years: stability in goal. One game in particular made headlines. It was February 1997. The Islanders were up against the Philadelphia Flyers, a team loaded with talent like Eric Lindros and John LeClaire. Most expected a blowout, but Salo stood on his head, stopping 45 of 46 shots and helping the Islanders pull off a shocking win. It wasn't just the number of saves, it was the way he made them. One glove save on Lindros, who was charging full speed from the slot, made the highlight reels across North America. People started asking, who is this guy? And more importantly, where did he come from? In interviews, Salo always kept it simple. He wasn't chasing fame, he wasn't trying to be flashy, he just wanted to stop the puck. Coaches loved that about him, so did teammates. One of the Islanders' defensemen said in a post-game interview, With Tommy back there, we feel like we can actually take some risks. We know he's got us covered, but the truth is, even while Salo was holding things together in goal, the Islanders were falling apart. The team was going through front office drama, roster turnover, and constant pressure from fans and media. They weren't winning, and that meant changes were coming. In 1999, the Islanders decided to move on from Salo, despite his solid play. They traded him to the Edmonton Oilers, a team looking for a consistent starter after years of uncertainty in net. For Salo, it was a fresh start, and right away it felt different. In Edmonton, the fans loved goalies who worked hard. It's a blue-collar city. They don't expect perfection, they expect effort. And that's exactly what Tommy gave them. In his first full season with the Oilers, Salo played 66 games and posted a career-best .914 save percentage. He was quick, smart, and most of all, consistent. The Oilers made the playoffs that year, and even though they lost in the first round to the Dallas Stars, Salo was a difference maker. Game 5 was his signature moment. He stopped 38 of 40 shots and almost stole the game single-handedly. The fans in Edmonton started calling him Tommy Wall. It wasn't a flashy nickname, but it fit him perfectly. Over the next few seasons, Salo continued to play at a high level. He didn't talk trash. He didn't make excuses. He just made saves. Coaches trusted him because he never let the moment get too big. He read plays 2 seconds before they happened. His angles were tight, his rebound control was elite, and even in wild scramble situations, he rarely got caught out of position. What really set him apart though was his focus. You could see it in his eyes during shootouts or 5-on-3 penalty kills. He didn't flinch. One Oilers assistant coach once said, "Tommy's heartbeat doesn't change no matter what's going on. You could be up by 5 or down by 3 and he'd still have the same calm look on his face." There were plenty of moments where he saved the team. A double overtime win against the Colorado Avalanche in 2001 where he stopped Peter Forsberg on a breakaway. The shutout against the Detroit Red Wings, one of the best teams in the league at the time. Night after night, Tommy Salo showed why he belonged. And by 2002, he wasn't just respected in Edmonton. He was one of the most trusted goaltenders in the NHL. But hockey is a cruel sport, and just as fast as a player can rise, they can fall. For Tommy Salo, the next chapter would take him to the world's biggest stage and test everything he had built. Before the world remembered Tommy Salo for a mistake, they celebrated him for a miracle. In February 1994, the Winter Olympics were held in Lillehammer, Norway. It was cold, snowy, and buzzing with energy. For Sweden, this wasn't just another Olympic hockey tournament. This was their shot at something they'd never achieved before: Olympic gold. Sweden had always been good at hockey, solid, technical, disciplined, but when it came to the very top of the international stage, they always seemed to fall just short. 1994 was their chance to change that. The tournament featured several future NHL stars. Names like Paul Kariya, Peter Forsberg, Teemu Selanne, and Dominik Hasek were all there. It was one of the most talented Olympic fields the sport had ever seen. But quietly, without making a fuss, Sweden brought with them a goalie not many outside of Europe had heard of: Tommy Salo. He wasn't the team's superstar. That role belonged to players like Mats Näslund or the young Peter Forsberg. But Salo was steady, reliable, calm under pressure, just what Sweden needed between the pipes. Their first game was against Slovakia, a physical team that liked to crash the net and wear goalies down. Salo stayed locked in, turning away rush after rush, helping Sweden secure a 4-2 win. It wasn't flashy, but it was enough. Next came France, an easier matchup on paper, but one that still demanded focus. Salo earned his first shutout of the tournament, and Sweden rolled to a 7-0 win. Then came the tougher tests. Sweden faced the United States in a tense group stage battle. The game was tight, fast, physical, but Salo stood tall again. He made 29 saves, many in the third period as the Americans pushed to tie. Sweden held on for a 4-1 win, and suddenly, fans back home started to believe. Could this really be their year? In the quarterfinals, they faced Germany. Salo gave up an early goal, but didn't let it rattle him. He reset, dialed in, and slammed the door shut for the rest of the night. Sweden won 3-1. They were going to the semis, and that's when things got real. Sweden's opponent in the semifinal was Finland, their biggest rivals, a team they knew well, and a team that would love nothing more than to ruin their Olympic dream. The building was loud, the hits were harder, every shift felt like life or death. Finland scored first, but Sweden answered. Then they took the lead, but late in the third, Finland tied it. The crowd exploded, and with minutes left, it felt like all the momentum had shifted. But again, it was Tommy Salo who saved them. With under 90 seconds to go, Finland got a clean look from the high slot, a rocket of a wrist shot, and somehow, Salo got his blocker on it. A save that didn't just stop a goal, it may have saved the entire tournament. Moments later, Sweden scored the game winner and added an empty netter. Final score, 4-2. Sweden was going to the gold medal game for the first time ever. Their opponent, Canada, a hockey superpower, a country where winning gold wasn't a hope, it was an expectation. They had their own young stars, including Paul Kariya and Petr Nedved. In net, they had the legendary Corey Hirsch. February 27, 1994, gold medal game. Lillehammer was electric. Swedish flags filled the stands. Back home, entire neighborhoods were packed into living rooms, bars, and cafes, waiting, hoping, praying. The game was a classic. Tied 1-1 after regulation, no winner after overtime, so it came down to a shootout. 5 shots, 1 gold medal. Salo skated to the crease, took his stance, and waited. His eyes never blinked, his gloves stayed loose. He looked like he wasn't even nervous, but inside he knew this was it. Canada's first shooter scored, Sweden's missed. The pressure was on, but Salo didn't break. He stopped the second shot, then the third, then the fourth. Meanwhile, Sweden had clawed back to tie it. It came down to one final round. Canada sent up Petr Nedved, an elite sniper with one of the best releases in the tournament. He skated in slowly, made a quick move, tried to fool Salo with a fake to the glove side. Nedved scored on his shot, keeping the pressure high, but Tommy didn't flinch. He stayed square and ready for what was next. Sweden still needed 1 goal. Peter Forsberg, just 20 years old at the time, was the last man up, and what he did next became legendary. He deked left, pulled the puck back with one hand, and slid it past Hirsch, scoring what is now known simply as the Forsberg move. It was pure magic. Sweden had done it. They won the shootout. They won the game. They won Olympic gold. And Tommy Salo, he wasn't just a goalie anymore, he was a hero. Back home, the reaction was instant and overwhelming. Swedish newspapers ran his photo across the front page. Kids in schools pretended to be him during recess. Street hockey games ended with "Salo wins it," shouted in celebration. TV anchors called it the greatest day in Swedish hockey history. Talk shows praised Salo's calm presence and clutch performance. One sports writer even wrote, "He didn't just stop pucks, he stopped time." In his hometown of Surahammar, they rang bells. Some people called for a Tommy Salo day, and honestly, he deserved it. He had given the country something it had never felt before, the joy of seeing their flag raised highest at center ice, while their anthem played and gold medals hung around their necks. It was the peak of his career, not because of stats, not because of fame, but because of what it meant to him and to everyone who had watched. At just 22 years old, Tommy Salo had reached the top of the mountain, and in that moment, it looked like nothing could ever bring him down. 8 years after standing on top of the world, Tommy Salo walked into the 2002 Winter Olympics with something he didn't have back in 1994, pressure. By now, he wasn't just Sweden's go-to goalie, he was a seasoned NHL veteran, a proven #1 for the Edmonton Oilers, and a national symbol of calm under pressure. Fans expected greatness. Teammates counted on it. The media, they didn't just hope Sweden would win, they expected it. And why wouldn't they? Sweden had one of the most talented rosters in the tournament. Mats Sundin, Peter Forsberg, Nicholas Lidström, Daniel Alfredsson. It was a dream team. A perfect mix of skill, experience, and leadership. They had scoring, defense, and goaltending. No weaknesses. On paper, they looked unbeatable. And as the group stage began, they played like it. In their opening game, Sweden faced Germany and dominated from start to finish, skating circles around the opposition. They followed that with a hard-fought win over the Czech Republic, led by Dominik Hasek, proving they could grind out results against top-tier opponents. Then they crushed Canada 5-2 in one of the most shocking beatdowns of the tournament. Everything was clicking. Pucks were going in, defense was tight, and Tommy Salo was playing some of the best hockey of his life. His positioning was flawless. His rebound control was sharp. He wasn't making flashy saves. He didn't need to. He was simply locking it down, game after game, just like he always had. Sweden finished the preliminary round undefeated. They were the tournament's top seed and were rewarded with what looked like a gift, a quarterfinal matchup against Belarus. No disrespect to Belarus, but no one had them circled as a real threat. They weren't even supposed to make the quarterfinals. Their biggest name was Ruslan Saleh, and beyond that, they were mostly unknowns to the international audience. The game wasn't just winnable, it was expected to be a blowout, and maybe that's what made what happened next so unbelievable. February 20th, 2002, quarterfinal, Sweden versus Belarus. From the very beginning, something felt off. Sweden looked flat. Belarus came out buzzing. They weren't intimidated. They weren't backing down. They played fast, aggressive, loose, like they had nothing to lose because they didn't. Sweden still had more talent. They still controlled large stretches of the game. But every time they scored, Belarus answered. It was 2-1, then 2-2, then Sweden made it 3-2, and then the third period. The final 20 minutes that would change everything. With just over 2 minutes left in a tie game, Belarus dumped the puck into Sweden's zone. It It wasn't a dangerous play, no pressure, just a soft clear from center ice, something goalies handle a dozen times a night. And then, it happened. The puck bounced, not a big bounce, not wild or out of control, but just enough. It skipped off the ice, floated slightly, and caught Tommy Salo in the worst possible spot, right on the upper arm, near the shoulder. It hit, rolled, and somehow slipped behind him into the net. 3-4, Belarus. For a moment, the building went quiet. Everyone in the arena, including the Belarus players, looked confused. Did that just happen? Tommy Salo stood frozen. He didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't bang his stick. He just turned slowly, looked down, and saw the puck resting in his net. His face didn't show anger. It showed disbelief. Like his mind was trying to process something his body had already accepted. On the bench, Swedish players looked stunned. Sundin dropped his head. Forsberg stared at the scoreboard in silence. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a moment that made time stop. They had 2 minutes to tie it. They didn't. When the final horn sounded, Belarus erupted in celebration. It was one of the greatest upsets in Olympic history. For them, it was a miracle. For Sweden, it was a nightmare. And for Tommy Salo, it was the moment everything changed. In the locker room afterward, reporters waited for a quote. Salo didn't say much, just a few words. Calm, controlled. He admitted it was a mistake, called it a fluke, then sat back down and stared at the floor. Later, in an interview, he said, "It was a horrible goal. I saw the puck. I was just going to catch it. And then it hit me and went in. I don't know what else to say, but the country had already made up its mind." Swedish newspapers ran brutal headlines. Salo's collapse. The worst goal in history. One paper simply showed a photo of him on his knees, head down, with the caption, "Why?" TV analysts ripped him apart. Commentators questioned everything, from his focus to his mental toughness. Talk radio callers demanded he never play for Sweden again. It was swift, it was cruel, and it didn't stop. Kids who once wore his number now made jokes about him at school. Adults who cheered for him in 1994 now said he had always been overrated. Overnight, Tommy Salo went from Olympic legend to national scapegoat. He didn't fight back. He didn't respond publicly. He just went back to the NHL and tried to move on. But something had shifted. He still played well in Edmonton, still put up decent numbers, but the confidence, the calm, that unbeatable look in his eyes, it was fading. Goalies are used to pressure, but not this kind. This was different. This wasn't just one tough game. This was the moment that followed him everywhere. Every city, every rink, every interview. Even years later, fans didn't ask about his Olympic goal. They asked about that goal. And that's the thing. Sometimes all it takes is one bounce, one strange play, one moment where the puck doesn't do what it's supposed to. And suddenly everything that came before it, everything you built, everything you earned, gets buried under that 1 second of failure. For Tommy Salo, that bounce off his shoulder became more than just a bad goal. It became a turning point. The moment when one of hockey's most dependable goaltenders became a name people remembered for all the wrong reasons. But even that doesn't tell the full story, because the fall wasn't over yet. When the puck slipped past Tommy Salo's shoulder and into the net, it didn't just end a hockey game, it ended something deeper. For Sweden, the loss to Belarus in the 2002 Olympics was a national shock. People weren't just disappointed, they were stunned, angry, heartbroken. For many, it felt like the entire country had been embarrassed on the world stage. And fair or not, all that emotion landed on one man's shoulders. Tommy Salo. The headlines came fast and hard. Sweden's biggest newspapers used words like disaster, collapse, and shame. Some didn't even print his name in the headline, just the goalie or number one, as if writing his name would only make the pain worse. The photo of him on his knees, eyes closed, was everywhere. And it didn't stop at the media. Back home, fans who once praised him turned cold. Talk shows and radio hosts spent hours debating if he should ever wear the national jersey again. Some said he choked, others said he was never that good to begin with. A few tried to defend him, but their voices were drowned out in the noise. For Tommy, it wasn't just public criticism, it was personal rejection. The same country that once idolized him after the 1994 gold medal had now turned their back. But inside the locker room, things were more complicated. Some of his teammates understood. They'd played long enough to know that anyone, no matter how good, could have a bad moment. They didn't say much, but they didn't need to. A pat on the back, a quiet word of support, that was their way of saying they still believed in him. Others, though, were frustrated. A few players off the record hinted that Salo wasn't sharp enough in big games anymore, that he wasn't the same goalie he used to be. No one said it publicly, but behind the scenes, the trust was shaken. Salo never argued. He never fought back, but people close to him could see the change. He started carrying himself differently, quieter than usual. He'd always been reserved, but now it felt like something had gone dim inside him. The press noticed too. In interviews, his answers were short, measured, almost rehearsed, as if he was trying to say the right thing while feeling absolutely nothing. One journalist wrote, "It's like he's wearing a mask behind the mask. The one on the ice hides his face. The one off the ice hides his heart." And that wasn't just poetic writing, it was real. In Edmonton, where he continued playing for the Oilers, Salo still posted decent numbers, but something was missing. The reflexes were still there. The technique was fine, but the magic, the quiet confidence that once made him look unbeatable, was fading. Coaches started to notice too. Before Salt Lake, Salo was the clear number one. There was no debate. But now slowly, without making headlines, the Oilers began to give more starts to the backup. Not because Salo was bad, but because he didn't seem like the guy anymore. In big moments, he flinched. Not dramatically, but just enough. A rebound he would have controlled before now bounced into the slot. A rush that used to end in a pad save now slid through 5-hole. Little mistakes. But in the NHL, little things add up fast. The worst part? Salo knew it. He was aware of every slip, every soft goal, every whisper in the stands. And instead of brushing it off like he used to, he carried it. Like weight on his chest, game after game. Even off the ice, it was clear he was struggling. Teammates said he stayed late after practice, sometimes just sitting alone in the locker room. One reporter said he once saw Salo staring into his locker for 10 straight minutes, fully dressed, pad still on, helmet in his lap. No movement, just silence. It wasn't just about hockey anymore, it was about identity. Tommy Salo had spent his whole life building a reputation, one save at a time, quiet, reliable, respected. And now, all of that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He was still showing up, still working hard, but it was different now. The fun was gone. And as the season wore on, the question wasn't, can Salo win you games? It became, can he win you the ones that matter? That's what hurts the most for goalies. When people stop asking if you're good and start asking if they can trust you. In the end, the Olympic goal didn't just hurt his reputation, it wounded his belief in himself. It was quiet, slow, unspoken, but it was there. The beginning of the end. After Salt Lake City, Tommy Salo returned to Edmonton and put his mask back on. But something had changed. He was still the starting goalie for the Oilers, still carried the title, still led the team out of the tunnel. But behind the calm stare, you could sense it, that invisible weight he hadn't been carrying before. The pressure that used to bounce off him now seemed to stick. For a while, he managed to hold things together. He still made big saves, still had flashes of the old Tommy, the one who could take over a game. But it didn't happen as often. And when it didn't, people noticed. Suddenly, every goal against looked heavier. Every rebound seemed louder. The numbers were decent, but the feeling wasn't. He went from being the reason we're in games to good enough to keep us in it. That's not always a bad thing, but for someone like Salo, who once carried the weight of an entire country, it was a step down. And the NHL doesn't wait for anyone. By the 2003-2004 season, cracks had started to show. He was still getting starts, still respected in the locker room, but his game had lost its sharpness. The timing felt off. The rebounds weren't controlled the way they used to be. When the team needed a big stop late in the third, sometimes it didn't come. Oilers coaches began giving more starts to backups. Not dramatically, not all at once, but just enough to notice. The rotation was no longer about giving Salo rest. It was about figuring out who gave them the best chance to win. For goalies, there's a quiet moment that hits harder than any stat line. When you realize the team's faith in you is slipping. Tommy felt it. That season would be his last in Edmonton. In 2004, the Oilers traded him to the Colorado Avalanche. A fresh start, maybe, but it didn't feel like one. Colorado already had David Abisher in net and was clearly moving forward with him as their starter. Salo wasn't brought in to take over, he was brought in to stand by. And that was the first time in his career that Tommy Salo wasn't the guy. He played just 5 games with the Avalanche. 5 quiet, forgettable games. No big comebacks, no memorable moments. Just a few starts, a few goals, and then silence. The 2004-05 NHL season was canceled due to the lockout, and when hockey returned in 2005, Tommy Salo didn't, at least not in the NHL. There was no retirement ceremony, no farewell video, no press release. He simply faded out. It was strange how quiet it all ended. For a player who once stood tall on Olympic ice, who played nearly a decade in the league, it didn't feel like the right goodbye. But maybe for someone like Salo, it made sense. He had never chased attention, never played to be the loudest. He was the goalie who did his job, took his hits, and stood behind the mask, win or lose. And now, just like that, he was gone. Looking back, the numbers don't tell the story. His save percentage didn't collapse. His goals against average wasn't terrible, but the confidence, the presence, That quiet strength he once gave to his teammates, it just wasn't there anymore. He had gone from being a backbone to a backup. And that kind of change doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, like a light dimming one bulb at a time. A soft goal here, a shaky performance there, a few too many second chances, until one day, you're on the bench more than the ice. And one day after that, you're not even on the roster. Tommy Salo never blamed anyone. Not his coaches, not his teammates, not the media. If anything, he seemed to carry it all on himself. Like he understood that this was the price of playing the position, because in hockey, goalies don't get to fail quietly. Their mistakes live on the scoreboard. Their bad nights become headlines. And when things fall apart, even just once, it never really leaves you. For Salo, the fall wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, slow, and that made it feel even sadder. He wasn't chased out of the league. He didn't retire in disgrace. He just drifted away. And that's how his NHL career ended. Not with a bang, but with silence. When Tommy Salo's NHL days were over, he didn't vanish from hockey. He didn't run from the sport or from the country that once turned its back on him. Instead, he did what he had always done. He showed up. In 2005, Salo returned to Sweden and signed with Frölunda HC, a respected team in the Swedish Hockey League. He didn't arrive with press or fanfare. There were no big interviews, no quotes about revenge or proving people wrong, just a quiet signing and a short statement that he still loved the game and wanted to keep playing. That alone said a lot. After everything he'd been through, from Olympic glory to Olympic heartbreak, from the NHL spotlight to a slow, quiet exit, most athletes would have stepped away, but not Salo. He still had something to give, and not just as a player, but as a mentor. Younger goalies in the SHL began to lean on him, not just for tips on positioning or technique, but for how to handle pressure. Because if anyone knew how to live under a spotlight and how to keep going when it turned against you, it was Tommy. Coaches noticed that too. They said he was more vocal now. Not loud, but more open, willing to share, willing to guide. He wasn't the same goalie anymore. The speed wasn't there like it used to be, and his body didn't move the way it once did. But his mind, his understanding of the game, that was still elite. That's what he passed on. After Frölunda, he moved to Leksands IF. In the second division, some saw it as a step down. But for Salo, it was about helping a historic club try to rebuild, about giving something back to Swedish hockey. He played until 2007, then finally took off his pads for good. But even in retirement, he stayed connected. He appeared at junior goalie camps, made TV appearances, not to promote himself, but to talk about the game. He gave interviews, not often, but when he did, he was honest, reflective, never bitter. In one interview, a journalist asked him if the 2002 goal still haunted him. Salo paused, then said, "I don't think about it every day, but I know others still do, and that's something I've had to accept." No excuses, no anger. Just a man who understood what had happened and was trying to live with it. In time, something interesting began to happen. The tone in Sweden slowly started to change, not dramatically, but little by little fans began to remember 1994 again. They began to talk about his career as a whole, not just one moment. When young Swedish goalies were asked who they looked up to, some still mentioned Tommy Salo, not just for his saves, but for his resilience. Because yes, he made a mistake, but he also came back. He didn't hide, he didn't quit, he played, he taught, he supported, and he stayed loyal to the game even when the game hadn't always been loyal to him. That's redemption, not in stats, not in awards, but in showing up when it would have been easier to walk away. And for Tommy Salo, that quiet strength, just like the kind he showed in net, is what people will remember most. Time has a strange way of changing how we see things. And for Tommy Salo, the question still lingers, what should his legacy be? Some fans can't forget 2002. For them, that one moment, the bounce, the goal, the loss, still overshadows everything else. It's the clip they have seen 100 times, the story they tell when talking about Olympic heartbreaks. But for others, especially those who watched his full career, the story is bigger than that. They remember the gold medal in Lillehammer, the quiet excellence in Edmonton, the years of steady play, the countless games where he gave his team a chance. They remember the calm behind the mask, and the respect he earned without ever asking for it. In recent years, even analysts have started to reframe the way they talk about him, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of how one play should never erase a lifetime of work. They compare him to other goalies, guys like Dan Cloutier or Vesa Toscala, whose careers were unfairly boiled down to a single clip. But with Salo, the difference is clear. He didn't vanish. He didn't point fingers. He stayed. One former teammate once said, "Tommy was the same guy the day after the goal as he was the day before it." That tells you everything. And maybe that's the lesson. A true legacy isn't just about highlights or mistakes. It's about how a person handles both. Tommy Salo had glory. He had failure. But more than anything, he had the courage to stand in the crease, game after game, when the whole world was watching. So whether you remember the gold or the goal, Maybe take a second to remember the man, because he never asked for forgiveness. He just kept showing up. Do you think Tommy Salo should be remembered for his Olympic gold or that one painful goal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes one moment doesn't tell the whole story. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten legends of hockey. And if you want to see another Swedish icon who overcame brutal treatment to earn global respect, watch our next video on Guy Lafleur. He wasn't misunderstood, he was doubted, hated, and targeted, but he never broke. And in the end, he changed hockey forever. Click the video on your screen now, and we'll see you there.